Deepening our spiritual influence means facing challenges. All kinds of different challenges. Criticism and expectations, our own failures. And we will be influential on behalf of God, in the name of God, if we face those challenges with His resources. I don't think many of us have faced this kind of challenge, as happened several years ago when 23 miners in Chile, 2,300 feet underground, a half a mile under rock, had the mine collapse around them, and they were entombed in a moment in the utter darkness of that subterranean cave, that mine shaft. I've taken tours of mines, and they creep me out, the safe ones, the ones that go 100 feet underground, 2,300 feet underground, and they are encased in rock. When the authorities drilled a small hole to them and were able to communicate to them, get them a little water, get them a little bit of food, the good news is that they had contact with the outside world. The bad news is that to drill a 21-inch hole, which is what it would take to insert this capsule that could pull a man out of the ground, would take not days to drill, not weeks to drill, but months to drill. If you think you've had a hard day, and yet these 23 men somehow did what they needed to do to survive, and they were all pulled out in the end. You may remember the story. It's an amazing study of leadership and influence as they described how they needed to lean on each other, how they needed a democratic process so that they didn't feel as though somebody was just imposing their power on somebody else, and how they turned to God, how they profoundly turned to God and became more spiritual than they ever had been in the rest of their lives. You and I may face tough days, and so that is one of the reasons why God gives us the ability to persevere and to plod. I think we don't like the word perseverance because it's got the word severe in it. I don't think we use the word very much anymore, and yet the wisest people that you know, the people who have the most to offer, have had to persevere through some challenge, through some difficulty. And sometimes they persevere by plodding, just painfully, slowly putting one foot in front of the other. Coming through the other side of tragedy, or personal tragedy, or just exhaustion. Perseverance. In the late 1700s, William Carey left his native England and went to India. He's called the father of modern missions because he had this crazy idea that you could go from one part of the world to an utterly different country and do something influential, something powerful in the lives of people. People said to him, including his father, "What are you going to do there? You're not a physician. You can't help people medically. You don't have any training in the government. You can't be an administrator." And William Carey's attitude was, and this is what he said to people, he said, "Well, there's a lot that I can't do, but this one thing I can do, I can plod." He went to India and he began this laborious work of learning indigenous languages, creating dictionaries and grammars, starting to translate the Bible into these other languages year after year. And in a single night in 1812, in a warehouse fire, 17 years of work, all of it was destroyed, including all of their accounting books and the supply of paper that had been imported from England. I dare say I would have gone back home, said, "God, I tried, but you allowed this thing to happen." What William Carey did is, after the fire, he started over. Page 1, page 2, page 3. And he said years later, you know, it was a little easier the second time around. And he proved his point. I can plod. I have a feeling that if you ever apply for a new job, you will not put at the top of your resume when it comes to qualifications, I can plod. If you're in front of the boss and he says, well, what can you do? You're not going to say, not a whole lot, but I can plod. You're not going to say that. However, when you study history, almost everybody who has accomplished something significant has plodded. They may have skill, they may have brilliance, but if they didn't have perseverance and the long view with them, they didn't get anything done. Perseverance is the way we get past failure. For one thing, our own personal failures. And I got to tell you this, if we're in leadership, if we're in positions of influence, we will fail. The Bible is one long book of failures. Winston Churchill said, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. When I was a kid in July of 1969, the most remarkable thing happened. Still, as I think about it, I'm awestruck that human beings were able to construct a metal machine that hurdled 3 men 250,000 miles away, and on one summer evening in July, which I remember standing out in my backyard, they set foot on the moon. Amazing. Incredible. Apollo 11. And then there was Apollo 12. And then Apollo 13. And on the way to the moon, something went wrong. There was an explosion in the spacecraft, which crippled the spacecraft. And it took all of the ingenuity and all of the effort of NASA, of all of these young scientists and mathematicians and engineers, most of whom were in their 20s, to get these men in this crippled spacecraft back home and to help them just survive. And they did. NASA called Apollo 13, and this is a technical term, a successful failure. Just like us. Just like me. The difference is the Bible nowhere says that God calls us a failure. He said, you have failed and you will fail again. I will never look at you and call you a failure because I never give up. But you will fail, and it may be the greatest chapter of your life is when you figure out how to survive that failure. Did you notice that the Hollywood movie that won all the awards wasn't about Apollo 11? It was about Apollo 13. The heroic story of what people of commitment did in the face of catastrophe and failure. There is a deliberateness, folks, to spiritual influence, and that is in the concept of perseverance. It takes the long view. It says, I don't want to be influential just to make a name for myself. I don't want to be influential so that I can be superior to somebody else. I don't want to be influential because I'll be famous, because most people who have influence ruin their influence if they seek fame or status in any way. Spiritual influence is a countercultural movement today because it assumes that the best growth is organic and progressive. Discipleship develops over time. Character forms in response to hundreds of different encounters. Knowledge of God doesn't jump off a Wikipedia page. In spiritual influence, we are challenging people in many ways to slow down, to let truth percolate, to develop many relationships that will yield many different insights. This does not mean slowness or sluggishness, but deliberateness. Perseverance is a long view vision. The best work we can do is so important, so big, so visionary that it cannot be completed in a lifetime. These are the entrepreneurs who start companies that they know will take decades to build. The social activists who take on issues like hunger and disease, knowing that there is no total solution on the horizon, but that any good thing that can happen today is a good. These are the pastors who know that their renovation in the lives of people will never be complete in this life. The very best leaders accept this paradox and tension. I will commit myself today to something that I will never see completed in my lifetime. But why would I want to commit myself to anything less? The only ultimate goals worth aiming at are those we cannot complete on our own. This is how it's put in the book of Hebrews. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. All these people, talking about the great heroes of the faith, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. That's the long view of influence. That's the big picture of influence. That's the ideal that will say, I'm going to do what I can, what needs to be done tomorrow, regardless of whether I get credit for it, regardless of whether it works tomorrow, because it probably won't work tomorrow. But I will do it because it's the right thing. And I will do it in my place of work. I will do it in my church. I will do it in my family. I will pray for people who are in the business world, for believers who are educators, for people who work in the government. I will pray that everybody around who has a relationship with God will say, I want to be influential by being an instrument in your hands, because you are the only one that can have an enduring influence in the lives of other people. And folks, honestly, I'm seeing a lot of people thinking this way today, and it's exciting. They're not thinking about the four walls of the church where the work of God happens. They're not thinking about pastors as being the people that do the spiritual work or other, quote, spiritual leaders. They're saying, let us have at it. Let us roll up our sleeves. But let's understand how it is that God flows things to us. His discernment, His wisdom, His power, His authority, great ideas and high ideals, and many, many other things, and generously pass them on to other people.